Reading in English changed my entire reading year. It was one of the best goals I ever set for myself. Hello everyone, I'm Anahita, and in today's video, I want to share my thoughts on 15 books I read in English in 2025. What I enjoyed, what didn't work for me, and what I would or wouldn't recommend. So let's start with the first book. Funny in Farsi. It was a reread for me and a pretty safe way to start the year because I read it over and over as a teenager. It follows a young expat growing up in the United States and trying to adjust to a new culture. Living abroad for many years now made this story different to me, and it reminded me how the same story changes to you when you have new life experiences. This book is made of many short stories, each centered in a specific memory or experience, and make it easy and enjoyable to read. Conversations with friends. This one is a bit different. I really didn't feel that much connected to the characters or the choices that they made. I had a similar experience reading Essays in Love by Alan Dobatan. I know the book is completely different, but I had the same feelings that I passed this stage of life and I cannot get into what is written anymore. I'm planning to read Normal People this year, so let's see how that one looks for me. Next, I want to talk about The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. First, I should mention that I haven't watched the movie adaptation, so there is no nostalgia involved in this reading. I enjoyed the beginning of Hobbit, but then I felt it's too childish for my taste. I definitely prefer The Lord of the Rings. What I liked the most was parallel storytelling, where the characters split into groups and the book follows their journey separately. But more than anything, I'm just happy that I finally read this series and I'm not an outsider anymore when people started talking about it. Next, I read the duology of Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. These books are dystopian and takes place in what considered near future in the time that they were written. I really enjoyed the duology overall, but the second book stood out for me the most. At the beginning of the first book, I struggled a bit to understand the characters and the plot, but then when the foundation was there, I was completely hooked. When I started the second book, I was immediately drawn to the story. The familiar world and the multiple perspectives made it deeply engaging. Little Women. This story follows four sisters deal with family, loss, and love, and try to understand what they want to become. The vocabulary was definitely harder than contemporary books, as I expected, but it wasn't overwhelming. I enjoyed it overall, but at times I had to remind myself that this book is written many years ago, and I shouldn't judge it based on the way that I think now. And it helped me to appreciate the book even more. Reading Little Woman actually made me want to read more classics, and I definitely do it more next year. Lessons in Chemistry. I really enjoyed it. It follows a woman navigating science, work, and life in a world that doesn't make space for her. The plot felt like a puzzle with pieces slowly falling into place. The story isn't always realistic, and some parts felt a bit exaggerated or too perfectly arranged. But overall, the story was warm and satisfying, and I connected with it. And then there were none. I read it as a part of a Read Book Club, and it was a reread for me. I read quite a few Agatha Christie novels, and I think this one is absolutely one of the best. The tension, the structure, and the way that the story unfolds at the end are so well done. The Very Secret Society of Irregular Witches. It follows Mikamo, a 31-year-old witch, and the book starts in October. This wasn't a book I rushed to read. It was gentle, warm, and magical. It's about being different, and if you look a bit deeper, probably you can relate to it. Matilda was a childhood reread. I still enjoyed it, but not as much as when I was 12. Reading it now felt nostalgic, and it was still nice. Gone Girl is a psychological thriller about a marriage that starts to unravel after a woman goes missing. I had already watched a movie adaptation when it came out, but I couldn't remember much. What I especially liked about the book was the psychological aspect. The relationship between Nick and Amy, the dynamics between Amy and her parents, and also how everything plays with manipulation. Even though some parts felt unrealistic, it was still an engaging read. And finally, I got to the last book, The Wedding People, and I was pulled into the story right away. Yes, some parts are definitely a bit cliché, but I could understand every character, their mistakes, their choices, and even their hesitations. It was just an enjoyable read, and I'm genuinely glad that I picked it up. And finally, I want to share my top 3 books of the year, which was a very hard decision to make. At number 3 is And Then There Were None. Although it was a reread, it completely put me again. And number 2 is Lessons in Chemistry. It was warm, engaging, and such an enjoyable reading experience. And number 1 is Parable of the Talents, because of its plot, narration, and especially the ideas behind it. And that's it. There were the 15 books I read in English in 2025. I'm really happy with how this reading year turned out. And I'm already curious to see where my reading takes me next. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books, or which book stayed with you the most this year. Thanks for watching the video, and see you in the next one.